Hey everyone, it's Dr. Rick, and this is an update on COVID-19 in Illinois. So it was 5 as of last Friday, but today we had positive cases again. So the amount in Illinois is up to 11 now. And prior, there was a recent kid that came over from Italy, and he came straight over, flew back as per the school protocol, and then had some symptoms, so he was tested out positive. And I'm pretty sure that everybody he came in contact with probably going to be positive. That doesn't mean that you're going to have a bad disease, but still, the bloom and the effect that happens when one person transfers to 2 and then 2 transfer to 4, it's going to be a multitude. And in the airplane, if you sat either 2 rows behind or 2 rows to the side of somebody that's positive, you get tested, or at least you're told that you had a positive next to you and you should get tested. And I don't know that it happened on Amtrak, but somebody just flew in from California, or is it Egypt, but they got off at O'Hare, got on Amtrak and went to St. Louis, and everybody has been informed that they might have been on the train. They were on a train with somebody that was positive, and so you can see how this thing is blooming. So far in Illinois, we've had total persons under investigation, 263. So the cool thing about Illinois is there are 3 places in Illinois that test. It's a presumptive test. It probably isn't as expensive as what the CDC uses, but there's a place in Chicago, a place in Carbondale, and a place in Springfield. So any of the local hospitals can send, and I believe within 5 hours you can get a presumptive diagnosis, positive or negative. What happens in the immediate care centers at Northwestern, in addition to Sherman Hospital, Advocate Sherman Hospital, is that if there's a positive that walks into the immediate care center, there's suspicion with the criteria, and the criteria would be recent travel from China. There's also the suggestion that recent travel to South Korea, Italy, Japan is plus minus, and Iran. So if anybody fits the criteria, they get put into the one room in each of the immediate care centers. At least I think in Algonquin is reverse flow, so it doesn't spread bacteria or virus outside the room. And then while the workup is there, if they're unstable, they get sent to the hospital emergency room where they get the test. But there's no test in the immediate care centers. As I mentioned in the last video, there's no testing. There's still lack of testing. So I think that South Korea is now up to 200,000 tests in the country. And the US is up to 400, I think. Or that's terrible. There's a website here that shows tests per million of people. And where is it? Here. So this is with the Worldometer. And in South Korea, per million people, you have 2,000 people being tested. In the United States, and that's South Korea is a population of 51 million. The United States is a population of 391 million. And for every million people, you got 1 person being tested. That's so appalling. So I have a feeling that we're trying to play catch up. But at least in Illinois, we have 3 test centers that give you a presumptive test. And then if the test is positive, and you have limited symptoms, which is cool, then it's isolation. The question of whether it's going to be a home isolation for 2 weeks, why we wait for the specific test. So once a test is presumptive in one of the centers in Illinois, one of the 3 centers, then another test is sent over to the CDC. So I believe 3 tests are done, 1 for the local and then 1 or 2 to the CDC. So in Illinois, we've had positive confirmed at 4, presumptive positive because of our machines at 7. So negative 221, and persons under the investigation 263. There are 30 pending. So we're getting a little better, but we're still catching the horse after the barn door has been open. So I think that we're going to have problems, and I have had a couple of young people say, number one, maybe it's a conspiracy. And I don't think, whether it's something of a plan to destabilize China or not, I don't believe in that. Maybe, but it doesn't matter. because whether it's a conspiracy that it was started, we have it in several different countries all around the world. For me, this is pandemic. I mean, it's in enough countries that you still have to initiate a containment or confinement would be important. Containment would be important, but here it's not contained anymore, so it's delay. So whether or not there is a true, if there's some form of conspiracy that it started, it's still everywhere. And regardless, so that's number one. Number two, you can't have fake tests become positive in several different countries. So no question that the tests are being positive, and the tests are positive for corona. And the death rate or mortality rate so far is still about 3, according to the World Health Organization. Because of the spectacular job in South Korea, they are testing everybody and they're finding a large bloom of positives. And so far they're isolating and they only have a small amount of positive deaths. So they're taking the mortality rate and decreasing it in their country, which is what we should be doing, but we haven't had enough deaths yet. So, I mean, it sounds like that's medicine. You take care of the disease after the disease is there. You can't, like in diabetes, you can't get to a nutritionist until you have massive diabetes. Even if you're heavy and have pre-diabetes or insulin resistance, not allowed. You got to wait till you have full-blown disease, which is, again, disease management, but that's another story. So the idea would be, if you have a positive outbreak, and this is where the outbreak, this is the CDC's website, and yesterday or the other day, this was mostly just pale. Now you're seeing dark colors come up, and I'm pretty sure that you'll see the darker colors spread across the U.S. And for some reason, Colorado is always going to be a holdout state. But this is, if you're used to obesity following or obesity tracking, the CDC has an obesity track too. You can see how the colors go from pale to dark to light blue to dark blue to light brown to dark brown, and so anyway, the sequence is there. So the problem would be also that if this is a virus, and some people are comparing it to influenza. Well, here's the thing. Yes, there have been about 10,000 deaths plus for influenza in the U.S. this year so far. And the comparison might be, well, if people have died from influenza and it's 10,000, why do we have to worry about coronavirus? Well, several things. Number one, influenza has been around for a while, and we have antibodies. Most people have a little bit of antibodies, so we can fight the virus once you're exposed. If not, you get the shot, and you can still fight the virus once you're exposed. So the coronavirus is novel. Humans haven't been exposed to it, so there's no antibodies. Maybe from the people that had it in January, if you can get an extract and then spin down and give to other people, but we don't have antibodies. So if you're exposed, the chances are the possibilities are that you can be that small percentage of 3% of the population where you die, especially if you're older or you're younger and you have multiple diseases. So number one, it's a novel virus, so it is dangerous. Number two, it spreads like wildfire while people have no symptoms, so it's asymptomatic passage. So you can have up to 2 weeks, and say it takes 2 weeks to show its head in a patient, meaning cough, fever, chills. On the 13th day, if you get day 1 and then you go to 13th day and the 14th day you're having symptoms, you're spreading the entire time. And you could be, I had a birthday party this weekend. I was trying to teach all the young people the elbow bump, but couldn't help it. It was still hugging. And that's going to be a problem. Not for me, because I'm high risk here in the clinic. Hopefully, knock on wood, I'll make it through in case I'm exposed, but for everybody else, because I will probably be feeding it to everybody. However, I'm taking great precautions. Even if I have influenza, which I did have 2 patients with influenza today, I'm still gowning up. I'm still waiting for everything from the PPEs, but N95 mask, overalls, eyewear. So it's very important to protect yourself. Number 3, number 1, it's a novel virus. Nobody has any protection from it, not even a hint of protection. Number 2, spreads very quickly in an asymptomatic state. Number 3, the mortality rate is about 10 times that of influenza. So if 10,000 people have died from influenza A and B this year, and the death rate, mortality rate for influenza is 0.1, and the mortality rate from coronavirus is, okay, let's lower it because it's supposed to be 3. That's 3 compared to 0.1. So the death rate's higher. So the chances are that if you get it, the higher the chances of death, the higher the possibility of older people or medically compromised patients dying versus influenza. And again, 10,000 people have died from influenza, and it's only a 0.1 mortality risk. The coronavirus is supposed to be a 3%. I think in Singapore you can see that the statistics might be changing because they're so good, but that's a nasty death rate. So that is why we really have to worry about this thing. And now I agree, if people are calling out sick from work now, I don't think that in Illinois the disease hasn't blossomed yet. It is starting to blossom and has logarithmic increases. I showed you, I'll put a link to my previous video. It has logarithmic increases over time. That logarithmic increase will spread like wildfire. I mean, since last week, technically there were 5 people on Friday. 2 were in January and February. 1 was late February, and now we have, say, 2 that were recent. 1 that was recent. There are 4 today. So again, if 1 was recent, it already doubled its time. So you're going to see the 4 will probably spread to 8 to 16, depending on the contacts and exposure in the next week. And then that will so it's going to start taking off really fast. So be careful. I really think that avoiding, and the Illinois has already canceled a few festivities, not everything. And again, it's not to be an alarmist, but the only way to control or contain the disease is for the public to be aware, and the public's not aware. There's conspiracy theories. There's just desensitization, saying that it's equal to influenza. It's not equal to influenza. Influenza is bad enough. I got 2 people that are suffering, but if you have at least just a little bit of coronavirus feel like influenza, you're not going to want that feeling. And there's no medicine. For influenza, we have Tamiflu. Corona, we got nothing. I mean, I still take Astragalus, vitamin D, and zinc, but that's not a prescription medicine, and it's just to boost the immune system. However, the problem would be, if you spread it, would you feel comfortable with being responsible for the death of somebody older? I don't know. Like that lady in South Korea, there was 1 person in the church that spread to 200 within a week, I believe, or 2 weeks. So you have to be careful. We have to protect you definitely have to protect the economy, so life has to go on, but you have to protect the community too. And in Italy, they shut down schools already, so I think they're doing a really aggressive job. I think the United States is probably going to have to get more test kits. I'd like to see it available almost like an influenza test kit. And luckily, the governor said that he's going to deal with the insurance companies, and they're going to cover the tests. That's cool. But it's still, the horse is out of the barn already, so you really have to play catch up. So I would still say be careful with your elbow bump, avoid very congested social gatherings. You don't have to stay away from work, but I think it's important to be cautious. So you see, I just scratched my head. I got to stop touching my face because I'm always washing my hands, and my hands are torn up. So I'm trying to chase it with moisturizer. I got it here somewhere. But hey, who cares? I mean, that's the price. However, again, if you have little kids, and the 2 people that had influenza today, they took care of a 7-month-old, and the poor kid already has fevers and chills. So can you imagine if that was coronavirus? So you just have to be careful and be cognizant. And St. Patty's Day run is coming up, and I am having apprehension about taking my friend Ed. I pushed him last year. We're going to walk this year, but I don't know. We'll have to see. And again, not to be an alarmist, but I want to be proactive. So maybe I can walk around like a bubble. And if I have an N95 mask, nobody will high-five me, but I'll high-elbow everybody. So just be careful and stay healthy. If you smoke, get off the tobacco. If you're unhealthy, have medical problems, dial in your medical problems. If you take care of people, wash your hands constantly, shield them. I was even thinking with money and pressing so if I use my card to pay for vitamins, this weekend I was trying to use my gloves, but I had to constantly take off my gloves because I couldn't get a good fix on the buttons. And I just realized if I use change, I got to grab the change or the receipt from the person. And I was like, oh man, I just touched that. So maybe I'm obsessive compulsive, but I just don't like this coronavirus. So hopefully we get through it okay, but I'll give you another update as soon as the information comes available at the end of the week.